Welcome to The Link. This is a program all about linking you with the resources in your community. I'm Joanie Sutter. Suicide is not an easy topic to talk about. If you have lost someone to suicide, you are not alone, as each year over 43,000 people in the U.S. die by suicide, and the devastated family and friends that they leave behind are the survivors. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Northern Connecticut chapter has a support group located right here in Avon at the Free Public Library. It can be powerful to connect with other survivors of suicide loss and a relief to be able to really openly talk with people who understand. Joining us today is Gary Giannini, who is the founding board member of the Connecticut chapter and the Suicide Bereavement Support Group facilitator. Gary, thank you so much for being with us on The Link.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to talk about the support group.
Gary, what makes death by suicide different than folks who have lost a family member or friend to death by another means?
Well, anyone who's lost a loved one, whether it's through a long-term chronic illness or if it comes about abruptly, it's a difficult experience. But there are some unique things about suicide that make the grieving, I think, a little more complicated. So I can talk about a few of them that I've experienced, but for other people there's different things as well. But I think one of them is that comes about is with suicide there seems to be not only a social and moral stigma that comes with that and blame that comes with that. It makes it difficult sometimes for the people that are left behind to find other people to talk to who are willing to actually sit and listen to them talk about the topic, because others tend to get a little standoffish about that. They feel uncomfortable about those types of things.
And does that make the surviving family member or friend feel isolated?
Well, that's exactly what happens is then you're saying, who can I reach out to that I can actually just talk to and share my feelings with, and who's going to sit there and listen to me? And so sometimes people avoid the survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I think that comes with this is, what do you say to people? So, for example, what might be simple for another death is a little more different for us is, what do you put in an obituary? If you see obituaries, you see people talking about a loved one dying through cancer, and it's always a valiant fight, or we fought the foe, and cancer's the foe. And now people can relate to that. 40 years ago, people didn't really talk about cancer. It was, or 50 years ago, it was sort of, it's like they thought maybe they'd catch it in some ways. You know, we don't talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Just like AIDS.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens now is what do you put in an obituary to let somebody know? And with cancer, like I said, that's very acceptable. People can wrap their head around that. With suicide, it's different. For somebody who may have had mental health problems, whether it's anxiety or depression, plus a host maybe of other circumstances that affected them, that's harder for people to understand those kinds of things.
Because they're not readily talked about. Accepted, yes, because there's so many people walking around with anxiety and depression and other things, family pressures, other kinds of pressures, social pressures, stigmas, etc. But it's not still as open to talk about. So you see somebody in the grocery store, for example, okay, and oh, they've lost their mother passed away, had a heart attack or whatever, and I'm so sorry for your loss, because of course you want to express. But what was your experience with when you would see someone in the grocery store?
Well, it really depended. If it was somebody who we weren't, we sort of knew in a general way, there was a tendency to look the other way, and or maybe wince and then come over. And I don't think they understood how hurtful that is to the person, what we did do is take a step which I think helped us make the subject talkable, in our church, we talked about, and our son, Michael, our son took his life. He was 28 years old. We talked about his struggles in his memorial service. It was a part of it. It wasn't all of it, because we weren't going to let his last act define who he was and all the joy and creativity and talent he brought to the world. But we wanted to make that subject talkable, because so many people stay in the closet around these types of things. And they feel they're the only ones. And we want to be sure that people understand that there's more people out there than you think. And it's one of the things that I learned, I think, over time, and doing some outreach for the support group now, is when I walked around, I went to the churches and I talked to some of the other people in the community who have a lot of contact with funeral homes, and they told me, they said, you'd be surprised. You know, an interesting sort of side story, if I can get into that now, is there was a gentleman that I'm friends with, and we were eating lunch at the Friendlies. And I was telling him about getting a support group started, and he was very, he's very interested, and he said, yeah, but do you think that you get enough people for a group? And so I said, well, they used to say that about gays in a community, that we don't have any here until one person came out and then another person came out. And what I found in the almost 2 years that we've been running this group, that close to 30 people, individuals, have come across our way, whether it's one visit or multiple visits. So in almost 2 years, 30 people have come through. Family groups, individuals. So they're out there. Just because we don't know about them sort of speaks to the stigma of we don't want to talk about that.
Right, you see in the obituary, died suddenly at home, and we're going to talk about the statistics. Maybe now's a good time, because you're mentioning that you had 30 people come into
the support group,
sessions. So what are the statistics now?
Yeah, well, I just pulled these off. The latest they have is from 2014, but nationally it's almost 43,000 people have died by suicide. Now that's more than die in this country for breast cancer or prostate cancer. So just to give you a balance of what's happening out there, in Connecticut for 2014 they had 379 suicides. That's one every 23 hours. And in Connecticut, it's the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds, the third leading cause for 24 to 34-year-olds, the fourth for 35 to 54-year-olds. And it's an interesting thing, because they believe that overall the rates are increasing. And for males 45 to 64, the suicide rate has risen 43% in the last 30 years, which is the sharpest increase of males of any age. So it's something that we really need to talk about, because as we see with the cancers, whether it's breast cancer or prostate, when the word gets out there, when you provide early intervention and prevention and invest money and finding the things that are going to make a difference, it does make a difference, as example of those two illnesses.
Gary, those are astounding statistics, very sad statistics. Can you help educate us? Can you help us understand, who haven't been a part of it, we're going to talk about your personal story in a minute, but who haven't experienced this, what is the right thing to say?
When you see somebody and who's lost someone to suicide, it's one of those depends things on your relationship, I think, and also the time frame from when the actual death occurred. The best thing for people who know is, at the least, send a note card to somebody that we're thinking of you. That's the simplest thing you do. It's not heavy lifting, and it's just acknowledge that that person existed, and they were important to that family, and that you care about them. So that's the simplest thing you can do. Back to your story of what do you do when somebody runs into you in the supermarket or something like that on the other end? If you see somebody, if you don't think, if you're on the other end of that, meaning you're the friend not the person who's lost someone, take a moment for yourself and think about if you get anxious or this makes you nervous, maybe you need to pass on this yourself, because it doesn't do any good to, I think, get the other person anxious. The simplest thing, and this is for me, I can't say it's for everybody, is just say, I'm really sorry for your loss. You don't have to ask how you're doing, because if you're not really interested in listening, you shouldn't ask that question.
Right. But it's an acknowledgement, because, and again, I'm going to just preface that this program is not about, someone who's in crisis. If you're in crisis, there will be a number on the screen, and you can also call the info line 211. But this is for people who have experienced a loss to someone, of someone to suicide. And so when people don't acknowledge that, it's almost like the person didn't even exist. And this was, in your case, your son.
Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about your personal story?
Sure. I can tell you a little bit about that. And two areas with this is, I have a background. I'm a retired clinical social worker, 30 years, and
out of experience there.
Out of experience, but also, I've done training. I was a hospice volunteer and did grief work with that. A hospital chaplain program, which I did grief work with. Also ran children's and adults grief support groups a little bit. And so that gave me a little bit of secondhand experience. But what it doesn't tell me is what it's like. And when I experienced this, you never really know until things happen to you, what it's really like. And that's what I bring to this support group, is I'm somebody who's had that, besides all that, because I'm not there to be the mental health expert in that group. I'm not there to be the grief expert. We're there to listen, to help people feel safe in talking about their experience. Most people go there to feel understood, to try and understand, and to find some measure of hope and comfort.
So you create the space.
That's right. My personal story, I'm married, I have a daughter and a son, Michael. Michael took his own life April 17th, 2011. He was 28 years old. It was a shock, but not a surprise to us. We had worried about him for 10 years. And the reasons why, and nobody really knows. It's kind of an accumulation of many things over many years, but there's no simple answer, and that's often the case with many people. There's no real simple answer with that. And the pain I felt and the feelings I felt, there's no words to describe that to anyone else unless they've experienced it. And when those two policemen knocked on our front door and said, Mr. Giannini, we're here about your son Michael, that was it. It was the depths.
And so you can relate to where another person may have empathy and be a wonderful support system for another, to have people and sit around a room with other people who can identify with what you just said is very, very powerful and can be very, very healing. Now, when you decided, you were the founder of this chapter.
Well, for this support group and a co-founder, yes.
Yes. When did you start your work in Avon here?
That started in September of 2015.
2015, okay. And so this is a monthly support group. What's it like? What would be, if someone's watching and thinking, well, maybe I'd like to go, but I'm not sure what it's like?
Well, I can tell you a little bit. It's actually show you how time blurs for me. It was 2014 that I started this, so it's been 2 years. But what I tell people is, when you come in, this is a place, my role is, again, is to help you feel safe, to talk about whatever's on your mind. We're not there to offer unsolicited advice to people. You're there with people who understand. We're all basically in the same boat, more or less. And you're accepted for who you are and your profound loss. And so when you come in there, when you talk about your story, and you may think, God, I'm the only one that this has happened to, or this is, you think, how could anybody understand this? Well, we don't understand exactly, but we've all had similar experiences. And so when we sit around, we're not wincing, we're not turning away, we're not saying, well, nice talking to you, but we got to go. Yeah.
Right, and you understand the depth to the pain.
Yes.
Because the pain can be so profound, and it doesn't just stop.
No.
And so to be able to be with that pain with another human being is the power of the healing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you all understand. Unfortunately, it's an unfortunate bond that brought you together, but it can be a healing bond.
It's one of the few places where those of us that are left behind will have somebody to listen. And that's healing power in itself.
How long are the group sessions?
It's an hour and a half.
Okay, and they're monthly.
Yeah.
Are there any other resources that are given on support, general information?
Sure. I give everybody a packet that comes in that has some basic information. There's a reading list if they want. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is an excellent website. It's afsp.org. And also, there's no charge for this. We're volunteers. My wife is there with me. This is strictly voluntary. This is our mission. Mm-hmm. We have books, so it's a lending library. Mm-hmm. It's the honor system. You just put who took your book and you take it with you, and there's a variety of things. But
how have you seen it evolve? You know, it's been 2 years. How have you seen it evolve? Well, you just started. You and your wife wanted to offer this, which is amazing in itself.
What's interesting, what I've learned there, a couple of things that I've learned is when I first came in, I thought, because when we were having a problem, you know, I shouldn't say a problem, we were struggling in the first year or so afterwards. We went to a support group, and it was great for us. I could cry there, I could say whatever I wanted, and people would just nod, and they wouldn't say too much, but they're very supportive. What I learned is in this group, which is interesting, is because I would say in the beginning, well, we found the first couple of years was very helpful for us. And one of the people who was in the group, was their first experience going to anything like that, said, well, it's been 5 years for me, and I'm just opening up to grieving at this point. So that's something I learned. It's not always the first year. Some people, for their own peace of mind or their own emotional safety, have shut down. And this is the first opportunity for them to express themselves and feel safe that they can do that, and that there are people there that will listen, not only listen to them, but provide some comfort and a little bit of hope. So that's one thing that I learned with that. Another thing is there was people who've come in at different stages, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, some people it was 7 years, and it lets the new people that have come in say, you can survive. You won't believe it now, but over time, with people that are supportive, that are compassionate, whether that's a therapist, whether that's family or friends, whether that's your clergy or your faith community, you can survive this. And a support group was good for us. It may not be for everybody, but that's something that was helpful for us. And like I said, there's no charge. You come as often as you want, whenever you need. We're going to there because that's our mission.
It's wonderful, Gary. And how would someone participate? Because it's not the kind of thing where, you know, we're going to put a date and time and let people know when it is. If someone has had this kind of a profound loss, what would they do? What would their next step be?
First thing they should do is call. There's a phone number, and there's also an email address, but the best thing is to call me, and I think that number is going to be posted.
It's on the screen right now, yeah?
You call that number, and you leave me a message on there that you've heard about the support group, and you'd like to get more information. And I do that for a couple of reasons. For some people, and they've told me this, well, I'm really scared about going to a group right now.
Sure.
And so I tell them about the process with that. The other thing is, I get a feel for them about maybe where they are, and maybe a group may not be the next step. For some people, they might jump in 3 weeks afterwards, and there's a lot going on for them, and they may need a little bit more time for that. And also, they get to feel comfortable with me. And people have told me that, I'm glad you spent 20 minutes on the phone with me. I'm not doing therapy with them. I'm there to just fill them in, answer whatever question they have, and to give them some comfort level. So when they come in, they say, oh, I know Gary, because he's been on the phone, he's told me about the group, generally what to expect. And I found that's worked best, and people have commented how that's made a difference for them.
Absolutely, because not only are they coming to a place where they don't know anyone, but they're coming to a place where they don't know anyone to listen and to share a very difficult thing.
Yes.
So to have that, and then you may decide to attend the group, and you may go for a while and not even say anything.
That's right.
Until you feel that it's time for you to do so. We have about 2 minutes left,
Okay.
which isn't a long time,
Went
and
by
there's
fast.
so many more things to discuss. I know you had some closing statements that you wanted to share with folks at home.
You know, I just want to let people know that we never stop grieving. You know, when you love somebody and you've lost someone, the pain is there because you care about them, and they're not there with you anymore. There's no pill that treats grief. There's no magic around that. But you can get to a better place, and you do that with the support of compassionate people around you. Whether, like as I said earlier, whether you're a therapist or your group or family or friends, you can't do this alone. There are people out there that can help you. Reach out, let people know that you need some help, and they can provide some guidance for you.
That's very powerful, very compelling, and the bottom line to that is you are not alone.
That's right.
And when you realize that you are not alone, and there's some wonderful people who have unfortunately experienced this, but are also making it part of your life and your mission to now embrace others,
Yes.
is a wonderful testament to you and your wife. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Now there's posters that are up also. But your best bet is to get the information here on the screen. You can also call the station if you missed the information. We'd be happy to pass it on. But this is going to be taking place at the Avon Free Public Library on a monthly basis, and has been for 2 years now,
Yes, yes.
which is wonderful. Thank you so much for
Thank you
being on
very
the
much
link.
for
Come
having
back
me.
and visit with us
I
again,
will.
would you?
Thank you.
Okay, all
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. On behalf of all of us at Nutmeg TV, until the next time, I'm Joanie Sutter.